Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox. I'm the Compliance Evangelist, and I'd like to welcome you to a special 5-part podcast series I recently did with John Gill, the Vice President of Education at the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners, the ACFE. In this 5-part series, we take a look at 5 different fraudsters, looking at the frauds they engaged in, how they were able to do so, and what led them to getting caught. We use this as an exploration for the compliance practitioner and the fraud examiner to detect and prevent fraud in their organizations. We take a look at Nathan Mueller and the fraud triangle, Mark Whitacre, tone at the top, Andrea Baxendale, unfair treatment can increase risk, James Brandolino, doing your due diligence, and James Gromazek, what is an insider trading crime? It's a fascinating exploration of fraudsters and, more importantly, the lessons that you can learn from them. John Gill has a wide and lengthy history with the ACFE and in education. I know you will find this special series worthwhile. This special 5-part podcast series on fraudsters is a special presentation of the Compliance Podcast Network. Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox, back again for another episode with John Gill, Vice President of Education at the ACFE, on our exploration of fraudsters. Today, we're going to take up the fascinating case of Mark Whitacre. John, welcome back, and thank you for taking the time to visit with me today.
Well, Tom, thank you for having me back. As I mentioned, one of the things... Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to talking about Mark Whitacre, so why don't you tell us about him?
Okay. Well, as I mentioned in the last podcast, one of the things that the ACFE likes to do is interview fraudsters. And so I took that over and always am fascinating with what I learned. One of my other favorite fraudsters I've interviewed is Mark Whitacre. So Mark's actually probably one of the more famous people I've interviewed. They actually made a movie about his case. So if you have, I think it's on either Netflix or Amazon Prime, you can watch The Informant with Matt Damon starring as Mark Whitacre. Although I'll have to tell you, they bear no resemblance in real life. But it's a fascinating case, and I do recommend the movie. If accurate, it seems bizarre when you watch it. It's kind of a tongue-in-cheek telling of it, but it is actually absolutely true. So I met Mark at a legal seminar in Chicago several years ago, and introduced myself and asked me if he would sit down and do an interview with me sometime, and it was kind enough to do that. And so we went through his whole case, and I thought it was really interesting. And when I think of Mark, my main thing I always think about is tone at the top. And it was really an illustration of how people take their signals from the top of the company. So Mark has a PhD in biochemistry. He's very smart, but he was on the scientific end, but he did so well, and he worked well with people, and he worked for Arthur Daniels Midland, ADM. And the higher ups at ADM, and this was back in the 80s, and they really were impressed with him, and so they promoted him to a vice presidency. And so when they were talking to him about this, they said, well, Mark, as an executive now, one of your new responsibilities is to take over the price fixing for these chemicals. And one was lysine, and there were several others. So they were food additives, but they were used primarily in manufacturing sodas. And so ADM was one of the producers, and there were several Japanese companies, and I think one from another Asian country. So what they were doing is they would get together every few months, and they would decide how much are they going to charge for these chemicals, because they were the only companies that made them, and they were used all over the world at manufacturing sodas. And I've been lucky enough to travel a lot all over the globe, and I can tell you that's one thing that is absolutely consistent across the planet. People drink a lot of soda. It's everywhere. It's everywhere I've ever been. And so the justification for ADM was that, well, it only increases the can of soda just a fraction of a cent. And they told Mark, it's like, hey, it's not a big deal. You know, the average person does not care if they pay a fraction of a cent more for a can of soda. But when you multiply that times the cans of soda all over the world, they were taking in something like $150 million a month just from the increase in price through this price fixing. So I was asking Mark about, well, what did he think about that? And he said, well, I'm young compared to these guys. He said, I'm in my 30s, and Mick Andreas and his father had been running the company, and Dwayne Andreas had been was in his 70s and was very respected in business, and so Mark thought, well, I guess this is how it works. He said, I'm new to running, I'm new to executive management, and I don't have any experience here, but if they say that this is okay and everybody does it and this is the way business works, then I guess it's okay. And so that's what he started doing. He started going around and he would have these secret meetings with companies to do the price fixing. But at the same time, his wife, her name is Ginger, and I've met her. She's a very nice lady. She thought something was wrong. Mark was, having all these secret meetings, and he would just fly off at a moment's notice, and he seemed, preoccupied. So she asked him what was going on, and he explained about the price fixing. And so she said, well, isn't that illegal? And he said, well, technically, but it only raises a can of soda a fraction of a cent. She said, but it's still illegal. This is not the type of person you are. If you don't turn yourself in, I will. So he, at her urging, called the FBI. And Agent Brian Shepard came and met with him, and Mark agreed to wear a wire and do video recording and record the information about the price fixing. So he did, and he wore a wire for about 2.5 years. And so there's some funny episodes that are in the movie about, the tape recorder clicking in the middle of some of these meetings, or trying to arrange the camera that was in a lamp to record the different things. And so it started to make him kind of crazy, I think. And you can imagine if you're trying to wear a wire at work every day for 2 years, what kind of pressure that would put on you. But eventually they had enough information, and they said they were ready to prosecute. So as the prosecution is getting going with the U.S. Attorney's Office there in Illinois, the prosecution team gets a call from ADM's lawyers, and they say, hey, we have a surprise for you. Your star witness, Mark Whitacre, he's been stealing from the company. And they're like, that can't be right. I mean, this guy is the informant. He's the whistleblower. He came forward on this price fixing. He couldn't have been stealing from ADM at this same time. So they bring Mark in and they say, Mark, tell us this is not true. And he said, well, I can't, because it is. I have been stealing money from the company while he was also cooperating with the FBI. And so Mark stole about $9.5 million over the course of this. And so I thought that was so odd and so strange, but it was true. Now, he did cooperate with the government, and ADM was prosecuted. They're under new management now. All those people are gone, and he helped the government, but the government did prosecute him for embezzlement, and so he served, I think, about 8 years in jail for that. So I was, knowing that story, and when I met him and I had the opportunity to sit him down, because the burning question in my mind was, well, what were you thinking? What were you thinking that you were stealing money at the same time that you were cooperating with the FBI? And so he explained it. He said, well, here's what I was thinking. He said, I knew if they caught me, I'd be fired. But I'm making a lot of money. Much more probably than I could make anywhere else. And so he said, I thought, I need to build up a nest egg. And he said, a few years before this, they caught the treasurer of the company stealing money. He'd stolen about $3 million. But he knew that they were doing price fixing and some other things that were improper. And so in order to keep him quiet, they fired him, but they let him keep the money that he stole. And so in Mark's mind, he said, aha, now I know how this works. If they catch you stealing, they're afraid to prosecute you. They don't want to go after you because they don't want you to reveal the things that you know, the skeletons in the closet. So they'll fire you, but they'll let you keep the money that you've stolen. And so that was what was in his mind. And so that's the reason he started stealing, because he thought, if they fire me, or if they catch me, the worst that will happen is I get fired, but I still get to keep the money. But I told him, I said, well, Mark, there was a big difference between that case and yours. I said, they were letting keep the money, keeping quiet. You were already cooperating with the FBI. And he said, well, I didn't really think this all the way through. But it certainly did hit home to me about how people take their cues from management. And it's like, well, if they're engaged in illegal activity, I guess it's not a big deal if I do it either, because they're making all this illegal income. I might as well get some of it too. And then the other thing is how employees look to see, how do you handle cases of fraud? If you're not strict and you don't prosecute and you just want to fire them and get them out of the way, then people see that, and I think that increases your risk of fraud if you don't take a hard line on it.
So, John, unfortunately, we're near the end of our time, but this has been a fascinating exploration of you're absolutely all right, one of the most well-known fraudsters and whistleblowers literally over the past 25 years, Mark Whitacre. I'm looking forward to tomorrow where we take up the story of Andrea Baxendale. Thank you for taking the time to visit with me today.
Okay. Thank you, Tom.
Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox again. I hope you've enjoyed this 5-part exploration of fraudsters and the lessons learned for the compliance professional and the fraud examiner. If you'd like more information on the ACFE, check out their website, www.acfe.org. It's a great organization. You can certainly get a lot out of it. They're most helpful for the fraud examiner, for the compliance professional, or for the business profession. This 5-part series on fraudsters with John Gill has been a special presentation of the Compliance Podcast Network.